Right. Well, we're live again. Hopefully,
I'm,
hopefully that works for everybody here. I don't know if
I
any one
hope
of you
so.
would
Let
have
me
gotten
see.
notifications, but we'll see what's going on.
All right. I'm contacting people who were on the stream
All right.
because it is back.
Oh, great. So what we're going to be doing here for the next bit, while I'm setting up the rest of the stuff, is we're going to be taking a look
Five
at.
people are here so far.
Oh, great. We're going to be taking a look at An Underground History of Education by John Taylor Gatto. As soon as I start opening up all the other things that need to be opened up in the meantime. So, in the meantime, would you mind, Stephen, telling a little bit about what what have your recent uh, excursions into studying education uh, elucidated about the system that exists and so on?
Yeah. So essentially, um, well, interestingly enough, all of the new things I've learned about education have pointed in one direction. Oftentimes, when you go to study deeper into something, you find like points of contention essentially, and um, you find that oftentimes the verdict isn't like very shady the deeper you go. Um, but that does not seem to be the case from what I've read of education. Of all the brilliant people I've met as of recently, and this book, The Underground History of American Education, they all like the verdict is clear that the system that we have operating currently is just kind of shit. And I can look back on my own experience and basically agree with that. Um, and Basically the main points of what I've learned are kids should be kids should be learning at their own pace. There's no reason to just keep everyone of the same age in the same group. That's just like way too ice. It's like fitting a block into like a cylindrical hole. Like maybe it fits right, but like there's still lots of gaps, and it just doesn't work very well. Um, People should be There should be at least some interest-based stuff going on with it. The kids should be able to pursue their interests, and not necessarily everyone has to be learning the same exact thing. And so so that's a big point. So, and especially for motivation and for
Mm-hmm.
like if you're liking what you're doing, education will be more fluid. And even if you're doing some things that you like, that good feeling that comes from doing the things you're interested in will make the stuff that's you're not interested in but is still necessary to learn a little bit more bearable.
Oh yeah.
At least, and I would even posit like quite a bit more bearable than if you hated all of it. Um, yeah, and it goes. I mean, and you should be learning first principles, and problem solving skills should be emphasized and stuff like that, not just brute force memorization. There are certain topics where you have to memorize the basics, but I still think with every subject introduced, there should be some amount of problem solving going on. Even if that subject is like biology, and there's a lot of stuff you have to learn and memorize first, but they should still, maybe further along the education. And I'm going out of a sentence right into a tangent, but the keeping everything in exactly like, okay, we're gonna do this in this amount of time. We're gonna section each class into hour periods. So we're gonna give it to you piecemeal, like drip it down to you, and each thing will last a semester. Like certain classes need to be lasting longer. Like everything is stretched. Certain classes are stretched out, and certain classes are compressed to just fit this time period, whether it be the hour or just the year long. Like certain classes, like could be just 2 year classes, I'd say, and stuff like that. But no, and it's just this idea of things continually being forced to fit this, like continually being forced to be the same thing, and it basically waters down everything. Maybe you'll find the one class that perfectly fits, right? That perfectly fits this format, and it works. But you're going to have a lot that are altered at least in some way, and then others that are like completely just like castrated, basically, and like you're not getting what you're supposed to be doing. And so yeah, just this idea, and this is similar to honestly similar to economics. I've been seeing a lot of ties between them. When you try to force things to do a certain thing, like when you try to force things to basically work a certain way, and they're not naturally working that way, efficiency is lost, and accuracy is lost. So we should have sort of a free market of education, so to speak, where basically what is necessary becomes pertinent by integration into the environment, and how long you should be taking on certain things and how classes should be structured should be basically free forming, and this, so instead of being forced into a certain standard, and more reading into economics has helped me like sort of develop that idea that, and although it might be intuitive on the surface, it's not exactly something I was questioning before. So I think it's important to question it, and it's important to come up with possible solutions. And you'll find that the solutions are not too, they're not extremely esoteric or highfalutin or far gone. It's actually probably even you don't even need as much money to do this to basically fix it. Like people be like, oh well, you probably need to put in a ton of money to change the system because no. The reason the money has been funneled into a system is this. There's the analogy, right? Or I guess it's not an analogy, but people, instead of changing ideas, they will funnel more money into the same idea, even if it doesn't work. And there's this great graph that shows that as the money, and it's inflation corrected, as the money being funneled into education gets greater and greater throughout the years, literacy, math skills, and scientific competency, like none of those are increasing. Some are dropping; they're going up and down, kind of, and they're just staying at a certain level.
Remind me, Stephen, to link that. By the way, that was an article or not an article. It was a Quora answer by Charles Tips, I believe, regarding education that we talked about a couple streams ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyhow, here we are. I have the passage from the book. The passage from the book picked out here. The link to the Goodreads page for the book you can find in the stream description. At least I hope you can, unless something really, really weird happened. But either way, great. So we're going. I quit, I think. And this is John Taylor Gatto. He tells a little bit about you get a little bit about his own background here. He said, in the first year of the last decade of the 20th century, so 1991, during his 30th year as a school teacher in Community School District 3, Manhattan, after teaching in all 5 secondary schools in the district, crossing swords with one professional administration after another, as they strove to rid themselves of me, after having my license suspended twice for insubordination and terminated covertly once while I was on medical leave of absence, after the City University of New York borrowed me for a 5-year stint as a lecturer in the education department, and the faculty rating handbook published by the Student Council gave me the highest ratings in the department my last 3 years, after planning and bringing about the most successful permanent school fundraiser in New York City history, after placing a single 8th grade class into 30,000 hours of volunteer community service, after organizing and financing a student-run food cooperative, after securing over 1,000 apprenticeships, directing the collection of tens of thousands of books for the construction of private student libraries, After producing 4 talking job dictionaries for the blind, writing 2 original student musicals, and launching an armada of other initiatives to reintegrate students within a larger human reality, I quit. I was New York State Teacher of the Year when it happened. An accumulation of disgust and frustration which grew too heavy to be borne finally did me in. To test my resolve, I sent a short essay to the Wall Street Journal titled, "I Quit, I Think." In it, I explained my reasons for deciding to wrap it up, even though I had no savings and not the slightest idea what else I might do in my mid-50s to pay the rent. In its entirety, it read like this: Government schooling is the most radical adventure in history. It kills the family by monopolizing the best times of childhood, and by teaching disrespect for home and parents. The whole blueprint of school procedure is Egyptian, not Greek or Roman. It grows from the theological idea that human value is a scarce thing, represented symbolically by the narrow peak of a pyramid. That idea passed into American history through the Puritans. It found its scientific presentation in the bell curve, along which talent supposedly apportions itself by some iron law of biology. It's a religious notion. School is its church. I offer rituals to keep heresy at bay. I provide documentation to justify the heavenly pyramid. Socrates foresaw if teaching became a formal profession, something like this would happen. Professional interest is served by making what is easy to do seem hard, by subordinating the laity to the priesthood. School is too vital a jobs project, contract giver, and protector of the social order to allow itself to be reformed. It has political allies to guard its marches. That's why reforms come and go without changing much. Even reformers can't imagine school much different. David learns to read at age 4. Rachel at age 9. In normal development, when both are 13, you can't tell which one learned first. The 5-year spread means nothing at all. But in school, I label Rachel learning disabled and slow David down a bit too. For a paycheck, I adjust David to depend on me to tell him when to go and stop. He won't outgrow that dependency. I identify Rachel as discount merchandise, special education fodder. She'll be locked in her place forever. In 30 years of teaching kids, rich and poor, I almost never met a learning disabled child. Hardly ever met a gifted and talented one either. Like all school categories, these are sacred myths, created by human imagination. They derive from questionable values we never examine, because they preserve the temple of schooling. That's the secret behind short answer tests, bells, uniform time blocks, age grading, standardization, and all the rest of the school religion punishing our nation. There isn't a right way to become educated. There are as many ways as fingerprints. We don't need state-certified teachers to make education happen. That probably guarantees it won't. How much more evidence is necessary? Good schools don't need more money or a longer year. They need real, free market choices. Variety that speaks to every need and runs risks. We don't need a national curriculum or national testing either. Both initiatives arise from ignorance of how people learn, or deliberate indifference to it. I can't teach this way any longer. If you hear of a job where I don't have to hurt kids to make a living, let me know. Come fall, I'll be looking for work. So, those pretty strong words.
Yeah, rightfully.
It's kind of interesting that there are two groups of people that I've always gotten along with pretty well. The gifted kids and the special ed kids.
Yeah.
The misfits, in other words. The
Mm-hmm.
people who are underserved by the school system. Because there
yeah.
is such a thing as being faster or slower than the norm.
That is true.
But the bad thing is when you try to medicate the fast, or the people that think differently, and then you force everyone to slow down to the pace of the slow.
Yeah, teaching to the lowest common denominator is sort of the norm in classrooms. And then if they deem that person, and if they deem the person too low, they just put them into a lower class, and basically then the education almost stops there for that person. Right?
Exactly, because when you enter the special ed environment, the expectations change. Rather than being, certainly people get individualized education profiles, IEPs, or individualized educational programs. But those are all constructed within a very narrow framework of state guidelines. My mom is a special ed teacher, and she says that making an IEP suitable for a child, because she actually takes this job seriously, and getting parents to be on board with it and so on, is a very laborious part of her work. And she would much rather just forego the IEP and give individualized education without needing to spend more time documenting what it is that you're doing than actually just doing it. But the system is a gigantic bureaucracy laden with paperwork and boxes that need to be ticked, standardized tests that need to be administered, and so on. If the purpose of the system were education, then it would educate people. Why in the world would you call is tests standardized unless the purpose is homogenization or standardization? Just like you have a bunch of cell phones on an assembly line. Let's say if it doesn't meet the standards, you throw it out, or you cut something out and replace it, or do something. And essentially, if you don't meet the standards of education set forth by the school system, you're labeled as defective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not right. Certainly there are things that are important to know, and if you don't know them, you won't be able to be successful. But then, if you divorce the learning from the process of growing to who you need to be, in other words, from the process of actually achieving a goal, you're doing the student a huge disservice.
Yeah.
You were talking about learning biology. Let's talk about how would you go about teaching? How much biology do you know, first off?
I consider myself to know none. I took 2 biology courses in high school, but I don't think I know anything.
Okay.
At all. Really.
So if
mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Okay. Do you know what occurs within the mitochondrion?
No idea.
It's a process called oxidative phosphorylation. Basically means that you are generating a whole bunch of ATP through a pathway by which a whole bunch of things that have been reduced being oxidized. And how do you get the things that are reduced? Other processes. And then whether or not you're actually generating energy as a consequence of this, or simply generating heat, is having to do with a phenomenon called coupling. Okay, but I just went and I threw a bunch of words at you. I didn't actually tell you anything. I didn't tell you the significance, and you could probably unless you actually have real biological need. Me telling you about the phosphorylation of ADP and making ATP and all the electron transport chains involved in it, that's all that is a load of hogwash. But if you all of a sudden went and were like, okay, here's somebody who has a disease of the mitochondrion. And you talk about all the different symptoms of the disease. And you go and you read a few papers that are a case study of this person, or a few papers that talk about the different processes. You just go open a freaking scientific journal. I don't care that someone would be a sophomore in high school or whenever you teach biology. Just open the papers and teach the biology necessary to understand what's going on in the life of that one person whose mitochondria you're interested in. There,
Yes.
and then you can use that as a segue into all other aspects of cellular metabolism. Whoopsies! I guess we just made a high school biology into a low grad school level biology course. Oops. But
Yeah, I know. And then it's this compartmentalization. Oh, you learn that later. Oh, we don't need to talk about that now. Like that basically like stunts actual learning because you're basically not even able to make the connections.
yes, if you're saying don't make the connection, that's the worst thing a teacher can possibly say.
And interestingly, and it's they hold us to know they hold us to understand it, and it's obvious that it's not sticking. Because, for example, when I took biology in let's see, freshman year, I didn't know crap. I knew I didn't know anything, and I still know nothing about biology. I took it. Let's see, I took a freshman year, sophomore year, and I took another. I took Bio 1 freshman year, Bio 2 sophomore year, and then like AP biology senior year. I didn't want to sign up for it, but like the school just put me in. They just filled my schedule with if I didn't specify, they just filled AP classes, which I mean whatever. And I remember freshman year, our teacher talked a lot about Bigfoot, that he was interested in Bigfoot, and yeah, so we spent a good portion of time like watching Bigfoot videos. So I was like, oh god, this is a joke. What are we doing? And I didn't know much, but I think I had a decent grade in the class, but I didn't feel like I really understood anything, and I was just kind of really hazy about everything. And then we took the EOC, the end of course, and I got the top score on the end of course exam, and I was like, and I don't know shit. I know nothing. I figured some things out on the test by looking at the questions, and I figured out more by taking the test and so, than I did in the class. I was like, well, if this is the case, I think this has to be the case. And I'd look at other questions, but I didn't learn, and I felt so shaky. And I scored way in the advanced range. Like that was they defined that as being advanced. I mean, literally not, and like I can vouch, like I understand when I can tell when I know something and when I don't. And I can tell when I'm just monkeying or when I'm just kind of I don't know, basically trying to take the test and get a good grade on the test. And it was completely a case of the latter two. I didn't have any deep understanding, and it never stuck the way it was. It never stuck for me. And we were given, basically, we'd have these 50 question tests in biology 2 and AP Bio. We'd have like 50 question tests, and we'd have a study guide that would basically be the answers for all those. So lazy. I mean, I'm someone who skips out on work when I will say is not the forefront of my interests. And I would just before the test, the hour before, I would just flash memorize all 50 terms. You get basically hundreds or not high A's on every test. So you'd think I'd have some deep understanding of biology if you looked at my test grades and you assumed that the school worked.
That's what you call grade inflation.
Yes, exactly. It's precisely that. It's grade inflation.
If you can get 100% on a test and not know a single thing, there is something wrong. There is something severely wrong.
Right. Exactly. And I didn't know shit. And on the final, I could still, because they just do the same questions on the final. So I remembered some memory would be jostled in my mind when I looked at the questions. So I still get like a high B on the final after not studying, just because I could I remember picking this last time. Um, and so like
The copy the paste. That's what
yeah.
one of my little brothers had a professor that actually told that this is what I do. I take the homework problems and I copy and paste them into the exams.
You
Then
said
I
it like
take the
that.
exams, the copy the paste. I take the homework. Do homework. You learn how to do. You learn how to get good grade by doing homework. I take homework question. I change some numbers. I copy the paste. You do well on a test. I copy the paste onto the final. Seriously, and when a teacher will unabashedly say, "This is what I'm doing,"
Yeah.
you know that something is getting a little screwy. Of course, this was for physics class, I believe. Yeah, physics.
Physics? For physics.
The copy the paste. The copy the paste.
That's just wrong. Oh my god, that's awful.
Well,
physics class.
Not really a surprise, is it?
No, I mean, it's not surprising. It's just atrocious. Yeah, and let me think of other like, and this learning doesn't stick for it doesn't stick for anyone. Those kids, there's a lot of kids who get like very high grades and have high grade point averages, and they do it, and then you'll see a standardized test come along, and that's generally where the fragile knowledge gets broken. Because, and here's the thing, standardized tests like the SAT, ACT, MCAT, LSAT, GRE, all of those things. I haven't taken the LSAT or the MCAT, but I've taken mock GREs, GMATs, all of that.
If you know how to take standardized tests, the LSAT and the MCAT aren't hard either.
Right. And like they're not like, the tests are not particularly like, I'm not going to say intellectually taxing, but I'll say conceptually taxing. They make, if you know the concept, you can get great scores. And if you understand the concept, they're not going to give you some, even if you get even if you understand the concept, they're not going to give you a really difficult problem that's going to sink all your time. They're generally just exercises in rudimentary basic knowledge.
Okay, the LSAT is an IQ test.
And honestly, all of them are at least marginally correlated. I looked at a study, the ACT, SAT. They have all of them sit around a 0.8 correlation with G.
Within a certain framework, you can cap out, obviously, because it's possible to get a perfect score. LSAT is, even the structure is that of an IQ test, or at least of a certain kind of IQ test.
Right, and people, it's something that they're like, well, you can practice and improve your score. That's not an IQ test.
If you can practice and improve on the L freaking SAT. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can practice and improve on a real IQ test too. It's just much more difficult to do that because they make they make sure it's not a test you're supposed to prep for, so they don't release prep material. It's a practice. The practice effect is a well-known thing. So, yeah, but essentially, and so so people who are smart will often inadvertently do well on these tests because because they understand things and they're, but
I love how you're just telling the truth.
Right. But that doesn't mean that person learned that knowledge in school, and that just means that they were smart. And I would posit that the higher the education, or the better the education, the lower the G loading of these tests would be, because essentially, if kids really are, if real understanding is facilitated, most people will see these tests as trivial. And I think that should be a goal. And yeah, that might be like what I just said might be a little bit loose and not quite, and not super maybe not truthful. I don't know. That's just, I just came up with that, so I'd have to think about it more. But any for you. But like that people treat standardized testing, and they treat it as some sort of like, you get the score you get or you don't. Like if you no, but if you understand the concepts that are taught in class, and the problem is the structure of the class does not facilitate this understanding. The structure of class facilitates, okay, force this down your throat in this particular fashion. And my dad, he tutored, and he was telling me how there's people who essentially, if you change anything about a problem, they can't do it. It'll be the same type of problem, but you change one factor, and they just suddenly they can go from perfect at a certain type of problem to not being able to do it at all. And it's lazy teaching to basically, okay, well, just force this down your throat, learn this is how it's gonna, this is how it'll be on the test, all this stuff. And then when it comes around, when a very simple examples come around on a standardized test, it's not till like the last 10 questions of the ACT. I don't know how the SAT is structured in particular. I don't have as much expertise with that, where problems get a little bit more conceptually taxing, and where it's like, okay, you actually have to think a little bit more on these and not just understand. But for the first like 40 questions on like math, for example, they're just asking you stuff you should know if you covered it. And there's kids who get all A's in courses, and then like there's so many kids who in my class who got much higher grades than me.
Mm-hmm. That's
got much higher grades than me. Exactly. And yeah, and I think that not only is an artifact of lazy teaching and improper teaching, but it's an artifact of it's a grade inflation. Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Grade inflation, because kids are getting A's without knowing shit. They don't understand things, and the test, basically the structure of your test, like in most high school classes, you know what your test is going to look like. Like, it's not a mystery.
It's going to look like a combination of the homework, the lectures, and whatever the professor said. Well, whatever the professor,
right.
teacher,
exactly,
teacher, whatever the teacher says.
But and not a combination that deviates much from that.
A, B, C, or D. Short answer.
Exactly.
Is there anything else?
Yes.
Maybe. Actually, I had a very good biology teacher, and she didn't have A, B, C, D tests. All of hers were long essay / draw picture / do whatever it takes to give me the answer. How does this biological system work? Blank page.
That's great. Yeah, and I had a good anatomy teacher, and it's anatomy, so it's not the most conceptually rigorous, but basically, like, they're like, all right, well, you're gonna have to be able to draw and label this system, right? This particular system. You're gonna have to be able to know what each part, And unfortunately, we didn't get to explain what each part does, but at least we had to like see the structure and understand the structure, and hopefully you can intuit from the structure what each thing might do. But
yeah, well, seeing it already and being forced to synthesize something is orders of magnitude better than being forced to choose A, B, C, or D.
Yeah. Oh my God. And what you learn, as especially the smart people, and this is not a good thing. Like, you learn how to basically game tests. And I did this on, for example, like ACT English. I didn't know a lot of the grammar rules. Like, I'd never really studied grammar rules, but I cross-referenced other problems. And there's kids who will get really, really good scores who are basically using their brain in the wrong way. Like, you shouldn't be using your brain to game the test and, oh, well, this and this and this, and then I know this, and then this makes sense. Here you go. And then you get a really high score because you can cross-reference and hold the other questions in your head, and then when another question happens, oh, I realize that's like this one, or you put something down, you're like, wait.
Yeah, when you're in a multiple choice quiz or test or what exam, and the answer to question 5 is in question 8, and the answer to question 6 is in question 12.
Yes. You don't have to learn shit. You can just go in and game it. And
I read all the answers to my test. They was in the later questions.
Exactly. And that's why on the biology final. And honestly, though, I did learn a little bit, and not in a very solid way, but I did learn on the test because I was like, oh, so that's how this is. I remember I figured out what a semicolon did on the ACT English. I was like, oh, well, okay, that makes sense, and etc. And that was because I was solving problems. At least I was at least solving problems. But it was a test. But we do so little of that in our actual classes that when I was introduced to, I'm finally introduced on a standardized test to this sort of thing. I did actually synthesize quite a bit, but and that's I was sort of being forced to make my own connections there. I was okay, well, this is probably how this should work. And so it was honestly better than the teaching that I had gotten so far, but not as good as the teaching should be or could be. And yeah, there's so much shit and so many like misconceptions and like basically a huge amount of inefficiencies that come along with our current system. And for example, they treated someone like me, someone who had a high test score. The school like would tote you as they're like proud of you, right? They're like, oh yeah, look at this student of ours, I was an alternate.
As if the actual school was responsible for the generation of the high performing student.
Exactly.
That is enough to take a spiteful person and turn him into a poor performer just to cause him to reflect poorly on a school that he hates.
Exactly.
I know people. I say this not because I've done it.
I haven't done that.
Though the temptation did exist, but I do know people that have done it.
Right.
I'm going to a blue ribbon school that I don't think is worth crap, so I'm just going to go throw my test because. What?
I went to a blue ribbon school. Oh God. Yeah, so after sophomore year, after I took the ACT and copped out of basically just let go of school, I was like, well, now I want to go to a state school and I don't want to pay too much money. Basically my boxes are ticked. I can just do whatever the fuck I want now and just keep afloat, like A's and B's. And it's with amount of grade inflation, like you don't have to do anything to get an A or a B. Like you really don't have to do anything, which is sad. Like I should have gotten way lower grades than I did. Like I ended high school with a 3.7, which doesn't, to most people, be like, oh, that's decent. That's magna cum laude or whatever. At least it was at my school, and I didn't learn shit. I didn't know much.
But if you do it showing up stoned to class.
Yes, exactly. Showing up stoned to class and not doing the homework and all this. I wasn't even turning in all the work. Just performing decently on tests, and that was enough to, like, the grade inflation is just so fucking much.
Well, that's because they're afraid that the tiger parents will go and yell when they're Billy.
Right.
He did get a perfect score on a test that he had memorized and spent a bunch of time trying to memorize stuff.
Right, and they're like, oh, that's hard work. Like, no, that's just stupid work. That's not hard work. Like, yeah, you did put a lot of effort into it, but like hard work should not only be defined by how much hours are put into it.
Hard work is going and accomplishing something that is meaningful to you. Because if it is not meaningful, it's because you consider it trivial. It's one of the, or rather, if it is meaningful, you won't consider it trivial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, exactly. It'll just be just a habit. You won't even have to work on it.
Yeah.
But if it isn't something trivial, if it's something new, then you're going to have to apply yourself to some extent. And exactly. as you continue pressing the envelope, as you continue seeking your boundaries, eventually you're going to run into something difficult.
Yeah, and honestly, back to the school, like toting people around, people who do well, they like, for example, I was selected as, but then the school realized it was me, and they put me down to an alternate, because they initially look off ACT score for Missouri top 100 scholars. So it's the top 100 scholars in the state, right? Like a whole load of shit, I should say. And and I was selected as one of them, the 2 people from my school, and then so I got selected,
And then
and
they saw
my
your
friend,
name and threw you as an alternate instead.
yes, they saw who that it was me who had been in Saturday school, like just not. My attendance was just horrible, all this stuff, and they're like, "Oh, we'll just put this kid in instead," and I was put in as an alternate. But they initially, because my good friend was one of them too, and he deserved it. Like he was like a fucking great student, and he went to like Ivy League schools and stuff. A really active kid. And he's like, dude, we're the top 100 scholar. He's like, they told me to tell you, and I was like, oh really? So I went to the office. I was like, am I one of these? And they're like, actually, we're still deciding. And so yeah, I got I got only an alternate position,
Oh.
but yeah. So
But I suppose that I don't know if you wanted it or not, but
no,
that was probably an attitude thing because they just didn't appreciate. See, I'm really kind of I go both ways because on one thing I think that if you're stuck doing something, you might as well do it well, just
right.
just for the sake of
And that's
doing
my
it
dad.
well.
My dad is completely that.
But then I also don't think. I think that some things are so bad that people shouldn't be stuck doing it. Period.
Right, and in my dad, for example, always complained about me in school. Like for example, I mean, okay, so his expectations are to do basically perfectly on everything, and it's like he like for example, when I had done the ACT and stuff, he's like, why didn't you get a perfect score? He's like, I was like, well, he's like, you need to study and get a perfect score, and or in school, he'd be like, well, why don't you just get 100% in every class and destroy everyone? I was like, well, like the analogy, okay, so that mindset can work, and that mindset can be serviceable in like certain environments, but in my opinion, the school was just so far gone. It's like an analogy I use is a kid or people who know how to multiply, and they know how to multiply numbers, and this is especially like this is very very pertinent to like kids at a young age, like especially like gifted kids who are basically being underserved by schools. All of them are basically being underserved by schools, whatever level of giftedness, and anyone who basically deviates from the mean more than like 1.5 standard deviations, like is, or that's debatable. I came up that off the top.
Yeah, okay.
Is basically being underserved, and the farther you deviate from that, the more it's shit, and the more garbage it is. And so yeah, so for example, there's kids who can like multiply and do. There's many kids who can do all those things before they enter kindergarten, and then essentially then they're forced to and then they have to count, right? Then they have to learn how to count after they do those things, and then so certain kids, I've always been an obstinate kid. So I was not like gonna be the person who's gonna sit down and just do my work. If I didn't like it and I didn't see any meaning in it, I'm not gonna be doing that. And so what's the point of that kid writing down and proving that he can count, right? Like give him a task that's better for him. And I've had a few teachers throughout my schooling who would like give me extra stuff outside of class. I really. I came back to school, like into schools, and like thanked them basically because like it was like it really meant a lot, and it's not that hard for those kids just to give them something more, and just let them work on it by themselves. Like you don't need to be putting them like basically. This is going off into like a random tangent completely, but I'll just stop that. I think everyone understands, but yeah. So I disagreed with my dad, and I was not doing the work that I just was like, this is pointless. Like what the hell? I don't want to do this. I hate this, and so I fared poorly. And my grades were not good, so to speak. And what was funny was that even with, as I said, even with not doing shit, the grade inflation is so bad that like you cannot. And there was other kids, and it's not just me slacking off. Like every kid was slacking off, and most kids are not giving it their all because they don't have to, and people are basically being taught. There's this concept in economics, prices as signals, right? So when the price of something is high, it's signal that it's valued, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the price is rising, that means the values get going up, etc. Grades should be reflective of understanding basically of content mastery, not of how well you memorize and regurgitate. And grades should be signals. And in our school, grades were not, they weren't signals. They were just how well do you acquiesce to these bullshit tasks and without learning. And that's at least what I saw it as. So I didn't value them at all. And so I was not, me and my dad deferred there, and I still hold that stance. But there are times in your life when it is good to swallow the pill and just, as we talked about earlier in the stream, just deal with it, if you can't change the system. And many, I guess I would be in that, technically following that logic, I was not going to be able to change the system, but it didn't bring more value, me doing some extra, like, menial, like, basically copy-paste homework. Most homework that we were given was not exercises in thinking, it was exercises in how well do you copy from the book. Oh, write down definitions, do this, do that. Like, just
copy to paste.
Exactly. And and that's gonna take a lot of. There was this great. There's this article, The Inappropriately Excluded. I'm sure some people have read it here, but essentially they were basically, they surveyed kids who are mainstreamed and kids kept at grade level, the kids with, as far as like, basically a lot of profoundly gifted kids who are basically kept in school and mainstreamed, and then they had some that were skipped at head grades and then etc. And they showed that basically, like, the moderately gifted kid did the best, like the low moderately gifted kid did the best, because they were fast enough at copying and good enough that they could just, but not too advanced that they still found value in the work, essentially, at least some value, and their ego was fed in the sense that they're doing so much better than
good
most
enough
of their peers.
good enough to do well, but not good enough to know better.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So they would do really well, and they're being underserved too. That's the thing, as those kids are being underserved too, but they just don't know it. They feel as though, oh yeah, I'm just completing these tasks and doing well, and then the farther you went from that, the kids were like worse and worse, and many kids dropped out. Like, a lot of them dropped out. A lot of them went to college and then dropped out, etc. There was this terrible one. There was this kid Alex with like a 169, and he was juxtaposed with this girl with like a 133, and they went to the school, like his parents or something, because he was doing poorly in school, like not doing well. He was completely detached from it, and they're talking to the teachers like, man, like, what's going on? Like, he's obviously brilliant. Like, he was reading, like, he knew, like, he was reading like Byzantine history and like discussing with like university professors, and they were like astounded at how knowledgeable this kid was and how deep his grasp of it was. And the teachers were like, oh, he's not the smartest kid here. I know a girl, like, basically cited back to this other girl who was doing really well, and she's like, I know at least like 3 kids smarter than him, and I don't believe in IQ tests and all this shit. And it was like, holy fuck. This poor kid is basically like, he came into school and he was so shocked by the tasks that they had made him do in kindergarten that, like, he just complied at first. He's like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Like, it's like you're waiting for the punchline, like, you accept it. You're like, okay, so I'm doing this, but what? You're like, wait, okay, so why am I doing this?
Count 3 apples into the basket. Okay.
Right. And they're like, okay, and yeah, exactly. And then you're like, okay, now count 4. Like, okay, and then at like 100, you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Did you just trick me or something? And then you just engage.
Well, that's like the move this pile of dirt from here to there. Okay, tomorrow. Now move it back.
Oh, okay, and then.
What's the significance of moving the pile of dirt from here to there if all you're going to do is move it back there tomorrow? Oh,
Right.
so the day after you can move it back again.
You're like, oh, and then once the kid picked up that, okay, well, this is garbage,
And
and
then
and I,
then when the kid throws down the shovel,
oh, he's got problems. Yeah, and then yeah, and it was so sad. Like the teachers, first of all, the teachers dismissal of the kid completely. Oh, I know this many kids smarter than him. She knew no one. Like she probably never had a kid that smart in her class before. She had no idea. And then she disregarded, the 100 years or so, or what, over a century's worth of psychometric like evaluation. Yeah, there's certain times when like IQ tests give lower scores, but very rarely. In fact, no, they don't, unless there's cheating going on. They don't give higher scores than like you'll see people underperform, and give a lower bound, but you don't see people scoring 170 who
that
aren't
deserve a
smart. Like that
130.
just doesn't.
Well, you could see a little bit of variability, it,
Yeah,
but very 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 little.
right, but little, exactly.
And it would certainly be within acceptable
Mhm.
tolerances.
Right, exactly, and
180 plus
yeah,
or minus 5, 180 plus or minus 10,
exactly,
170
right,
plus or minus 5, whatever.
exactly. So it's like, and that's why it's important to look at it in standard deviation terms, not necessarily the specific number. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with that. But yeah, so this poor kid got like basically the words used in the inappropriately excluded article was like completely destroyed by an uncaring school system. So that's a really a good example of one tale getting basically completely underserved.
Okay. So we see David Sanderson saying 1.5 SDs is 123. Yeah. What's your point? It is.
Oh, he said sorry. Just saying.
Yeah. It is. And that is quite ideal for a kid to be able to go into school and enjoy it. Once you start hitting mid 130s, it starts to get more difficult.
Mm-hmm. And then especially you'll see a dichotomy start to arise. The farther someone goes above the low to mid 130s, but basically how well they do in school is predicated on how it's like conscientiousness and what is their urge to like please people, right? Like some kids will just suffer through shit just because they want to please people, right? And because they want to please their parents and they want to do etc. And I know people like that who,
conscientiousness and agreeableness.
Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, agreeableness is not correlated with high. Like it's not, like it goes down. That's one of so the farther above that people go, the more like shit hits the fan basically, and
that
it
is
stops
why
working.
That is why compliant girls in the 130 IQ range pretty much have it made.
Yeah, no, they do. And my yeah, I won't go on more into that, but yeah, no, I know a compliant girl with high. I know I'm saying I know over and over again. I'll just
that's because you're constantly expanding your. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's literally
I know
what's
this.
happening.
I know this. Well, now I need to go, and then pretty soon you've got snowballed the whole thing. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so I know about, like, let's see.
So throw the snowball into the fire and give the condensed version. And after you give the condensed version, we'll jump in. We'll take a very short break and jump into econ.
Okay. So yeah, 4 girls come to mind that I think of when I think of people in teetering over this range of basically what's good for them. Like not what's good for them, but basically teetering over the range of where school starts to like really dissolve and not work. I know someone in the high 130s, and so 4 girls. One of them was not compliant. This girl, she's the girl I referenced before, like my sister. She's just an amazing person, but school was boring as shit, and she did decently in great classes, but she checked out, completely copped out mentally. She was not there at all. She was just thinking about other things, doing other things in her head, etc. I know, so she was around 3 SDs. I know a girl about 140 who maximized. She was like like she like got all the accolades, etc., perfect grades, etc. She was very like motivated for success. She's an INTJ girl, so she already is socially like a bit not. She's not like other girls, you know. And she was compliant and all this stuff and etc. So she maximized it. My mom is like, according to her SATs, she's 3 to 3.5 standard deviations. She's super agreeable and compliant. Like that's like part of her. She's very, and she has been since a kid. She likes pleasing people. She doesn't like to let people down. She thinks if she doesn't do something, she's letting people down, like irrationally, like sometimes irrationally. So she did really well.
It sounds like somebody who'd be an employee that someone would take advantage of on a regular basis.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And she's been lucky enough to not like be in those circumstances.
Oh, good.
But but so she did well in school and she, etc. But then I go to my dad, for example. He's someone like probably 4 to 5 SDs, and in school he got kicked out of like 15 schools. Okay. Literally, and he went from school to school. Just like he got in fights all the time, etc. Didn't care. I don't think he cared that much about the schoolwork. He was still 15th in his class somehow. I don't know how, but he like just so like obviously obviously school was not working out for him, and yeah, so you see it breaking down, and those are some anecdotes I have to share. So I mean, if anyone's doubting the statistics, like, you know, it definitely, like, this holds true. I don't think anyone is, but
I think autodidacy is very important. Having the self-confidence to be able to go forward with your own plan is very important. Having the growing up in a place with either enough emotional stability to get you through it, or just being so stinking stubborn that you're just not going to take no for an answer, and then being able to pursue meaningful goals are ways of getting around these problems. In other words, you were talking about throwing money at the problem way back.
Yep.
In the conversation. There's money, no better scores. Money, no better literacy. Money. Throwing more and nothing happens. It's because you're throwing money, and with that money, you are attempting to fabricate an alternate reality, as opposed to exposing the students to real life.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because that's what people pay for. People pay for you to build these prisons, to go and put kids with bells that make you go from A to B in 55 or 60 or 65 or 45-minute intervals. People think that fabricated reality somehow does prepare people for life because it is so packaged and so perfect. It fits into people's idea that the world is...
Mm-hmm. It's easy for people to accept.
Yeah, the world is not a chaotic system in which we need to learn to function. It fits into people's idea of order. And right along with order comes homogeneity, because homogeneity implies predictability. So if someone wants to feel safe in school and doesn't have a good emotional foundation to begin with, they would much rather have something they know it'll be the same every single day. We're going to be going first, we'll eat our breakfast, then we'll hop on the bus, then we'll go to period 1, then we'll go to period 2, then we'll go to period 3, then we'll have a lunch, or half the school will have a lunch then, and then I'll go to period 4, and then all the people who weren't in lunch during period 3 will go to lunch when I'm in period 4, and then we'll go to period 5 and period 6, and then hop on the bus and go home. Repeat. that structure makes people feel safe. But it is entirely possible to impose a slightly less rigid structure, combine it with a little inspiration, a little motivation, a
Yeah.
little real life exposure, a little risk taking, a little bit of skin in the game. And I guarantee you the kid that'll come out of that one will be way better off than the kid that comes out of the one that has life prepackaged for 12 years,
And when you
handed to them on a
prepackage
silver
things,
platter.
before we finish this segment, when you prepackage things, like, for example, an analogy you could use is like, let's say Lunchables versus like a home cooked meal, right? Like, yeah, a home cooked meal takes longer. It takes longer. It's maybe it's you have to go to the store and think about each resource you're getting, etc. Like, it takes more planning. But someone, do you want your chef to just give you Lunchables, or do you want them to like make the meal for you? Like, it's that simple. Like, in the real world, like, you should be the one, not pre-packaging, but packaging the stuff for people, and having
And
and
for
having this
yourself
pre-packaged,
first.
and exactly, and for yourself first and foremost. And like, yeah, school's the equivalent of like Lunchables. It's just, they're just serving it to you, and do you have to try very hard to eat a Lunchable? Like, not only, so the analogy goes further. Not only is the method of making it um, vastly less involved. It's just prepackaged machine mass production, right? But eating it, you just fucking put in your, like, there's nothing to it. But when you're eating a fancy meal or something, you have to think about how you eat it. There's etiquette, etc. You take in the food in a specified order, etc. Um, and 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 so there's more activity not only in eating it but preparing it, and both sides, and there's a reason it's valued more. Like, a nice meal is at a restaurant is not, let's disregard like ambience and stuff like that, or ambiance or whatever. Just the food itself is valued more, and in the same way education would be valued more if more thought was put into it, and it was, the quality was increased, essentially, instead of just being prepackaged shit that everyone has to. And if you get used to eating a lot of different meals and eating a lot of different foods, you get better. Like, this is, then I'll just kind of weak here, but you say, if you're eating Lunchables all your whole life, you would have no reason to learn etiquette. You'd have no reason to learn how to properly cut something, etc. You just, I just eat. So your mind turns off. You don't. No one's thinking when they're eating a lunch. They're watching YouTube and doing something else. And so not only is this just, you
You
could
mean
go on
like
forever with
watching
that.
watching the clock, or watching your phone, or watching anything that you can do to wait to get out of the stinking classroom? Oh,
Yes,
sorry. Oops.
playing Countdown is what I did.
Well, at least that was
It's
a
something, yeah.
productive use of your time.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we will have a 4-minute intermission, and we'll see you on the other side to discuss a little bit of economics.
Yep.
All right, how about now? Oh yeah, I see the audio. I see the audio levels fluctuating. Welcome
Cool.
back from intermission. Now we can go and do our little excursion into economics. This is chapter 4 of the PDF that I have linked in the description. Division of labor and comparative advantage. So this was a subject that you and I actually started talking about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wife. Yes, I got a lovely Father's Day gift from my wife, who, in spite of performing the labor allotted to her according to our division of labor at home, decided to make a special gluten-free Father's Day cake in addition. So I'm very thankful for that. But in general, division of labor is just the idea that I do my thing, you do yours, he does his, she does hers, and so on. As opposed to all of us trying to do everything.
I'm already seeing a whole bunch of probably relevant points to bring. I'll bring them up
Go
later,
ahead.
but connections of division.
Bring
Okay,
them
yeah.
up. We're just using this as a guideline. We can take any kind of bunny trails, any kind of detours we want.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so division of labor. I want to bring up the traditional parental roles and how there's a lot of like that would be sort of a politically incorrect, right? A taboo thing, almost a sacred cow. In the current paradigm, essentially, there's this push right against traditional familial roles, right? Like, and I want to just elaborate. Like, so essentially, it's all right if it's up to the people. So it's up to the husband and wife, the boyfriend and girlfriend, etc. Basically, it's up to the partners to decide how they want to go about how they want to go about dividing their labor. Essentially, it's intuitive to anyone. I don't think anyone anywhere needs to have this clarified that certain people are better at certain things, and so it makes sense to have the people who are good at one thing do that thing, and the people who are good at the other do that thing, etc. So then the maximum value is increased.
Well, actually,
which is part of the
actually, if I may interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a little piece of cancer here. So we have the lasten neovala over here, which literally means, or if I take a very slight liberty in translating in order to clarify a certain point, it basically means we, meaning a government entity, tell you how to raise your children. Neovala so gives advice. So, but ultimately it's a required for people here. Well, not required, but very, very highly suggested. And there are all sorts of financial incentives tied in. So basically, everybody does it. Very, very few people don't. And one of the things they tried to discourage my wife from breastfeeding our kids so much, and to pump milk instead, so that I could, like, I don't know, put the bottle at an angle, at a downward angle, and pretend to be breastfeeding and have the same experience as my wife.
Oh my god!
It's like,
yeah, exactly, and that's bad. It's breastfeeding is good for the kids.
Breastfeeding is good for the kid. Why would you screw things up? There is a natural division of labor.
Yes.
I mean, I do not have functioning mammary glands. My wife does. Exactly. There's another natural division of labor. I have a penis. She has a vagina. Guess who winds up having the baby? And she has a uterus. Who carries the baby? Yes. That is a natural division of labor. There's nothing weird about it. There's nothing sexist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
and so
yeah. But anyhow, going on.
Yeah. So there's this push, obviously, and at least currently, basically, talking about how if traditional family roles are sexist, all this, all that, and it's just silly, right? And it roots all the way back to this equality of outcome thing, and rather than equality of opportunity, etc.
Mm-hmm.
They want everyone to be doing equal things, and forcing
So
people.
my wife can do a more horrible job as a mother by outsourcing her motherly roles to me, and I can do a more horrible job as a father by
Exactly.
outsourcing my fatherly roles to her.
Exactly.
Because equality trumps effectiveness.
Exactly. And so I want to bring this all the way full circle. So obviously, women are better equipped for taking care of kids, and kids, especially younger kids, have and I'd say all the way up into adulthood a lot of the time, or I would even say most of the time, kids have a closer, like, emotional and physical connection with their mom, because that's the person who is basically was designed um, to essentially raise them, right? And so, but there's this, obviously this push, which is in the end bad for the kids, right? Like the push against breastfeeding, the push, etc. Like, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but like, obviously, to push against something that was naturally, like, this is like how people were sort of, designed to the root, like that ends up being worse for the kids. You get it's less efficient. The outcome is worse. And it's the same thing. I mean, the same thing we're talking about in school is when you push everyone to doing the same thing, and you keep everyone in lockstep, and you put everyone into the same role. People don't flourish. People don't find their interests. Most kids I know don't know what they're even interested in. Like, they don't know. They have a semblance of an idea what subject they're good at. But even worse, there's certain kids, me and my friends, who we were good at every subject. We don't know. We never explored farther than the confines of school. We didn't learn where the discrepancy like rose. So there's so many kids basically
But there
I knew
would be
this.
one.
There would be one. There definitely would be one. And this, me and the gifted girl I described, the 140, and one of my other friends who's gifted in college, we were all in this just state of like, what the hell are we doing? Like, we switched majors. I switched majors 3 times. They were like, she was like a computer scientist, and she's like, actually, I don't really like this that much, and let me switch to, like, she switched to chemical engineering. My friend switched from biology to biological engineering, which, even though they share the bio, that's vastly different things, etc. So there's just all that, like, not even clear what we should be doing. Like, have no idea. There's some kids who, in the school system, obviously they can tell what they're good at, and they funnel into that, and etc. But basically, this pressure and pushing people all into this standard thing, and making everyone equal, people don't learn more about themselves, because that part of themselves is basically being ceilinged in, and you don't realize how good the outcome might have been. And it's more obvious with parents, right? Like, if you just have the
Okay.
dad
Do you
holding
mind?
the
Do you mind
ball.
if I explain one little thing, just in case the
Yeah,
whole
go
idea
ahead.
of being ceilinged is a little bit unclear? I think that what Stephen is trying to say, and please do correct me if I'm wrong,
Okay.
is that if people find themselves equally good at something, but that's because both of them are world class, or both of them have reached whatever the ceiling is, that doesn't mean there isn't a difference between the two of them, due to the fact that if that ceiling didn't exist in the first place, and people were allowed to excel all the way to whatever their natural potential was, you'd find that people wind up gravitating towards one thing more than another, because every
Exactly.
person is an individual. Now, certainly there might be big overlaps,
Yeah.
but
And
everyone is an individual.
then there's people like Gauss who could be world class. Or what was it, Gauss or Euler? I don't know, but like, who is really good at everything and world class at what they did. Or what's his name? He wrote Faust. Do you know who I'm talking about? Wrote Faust. Oh, what's his name? Goethe.
Keith.
Goethe. Geeth.
I don't even know how to pronounce his name.
Let me see. I'm looking
Goethe.
up.
Pretty
But
sure
he
it's
was
Goethe.
the last Johann Wolfgang
Goethe.
von Goethe, and who was basically the last, what do you call it? The last person to know everything essentially that people knew at the time. Like he had collected that much knowledge, and knowledge was small enough at the time that he could basically be on the forefront of every field. That's very unrealistic, especially at this time. Someone of his caliber would still not be there.
Well, just because the
Specialization
body
is
of the body of knowledge is actually growing now due to the information age or the body of knowledge and the body of literature and the body of bullcrap that you need to sort through in order to determine what's actually worth reading in the first place is growing at a rate faster than a single person can assimilate.
exactly. And there's even in fields, like especially like in math, there's no mathematician that is a master of all the subset. There's just too much to learn. You'd be spending all your time learning these new things that come along. And that's assuming 100% retention and mastery of each of them. Like it makes much more sense to specialize in something. In schools, this is roots. This is where I'm bringing it full circle. And I know I'm talking about schools, but it's economics too. It's economics and principle. And like there's this push to be well-rounded and be super well-rounded, right? Like I'm quite like I don't agree with that. Like first of all, I think the well-roundedness is just an excuse for schools to let in who they want and then deny who they want, because they can you're not well-rounded enough. Even if you're super good at something, they can just deny that and be like, well, you're not well-rounded enough. And then if someone's well-rounded but not that good at things and they like that person, they can be like, oh well, we'll take him. And anyway, but that's besides the point.
So I wonder if someone decided to eat so much that his gravitational field would pull him into a sphere, if that would be well-rounded enough.
Am I well-rounded enough now? It's like, oh god, you took that the wrong way. No, but like I would so for example, colleges will look at people with tons of clubs and they'll be the president of a ton of clubs, etc. First of all, being the president of a club is like almost a personality thing more than is necessarily that person being good at that particular thing. And you'll have kids who are really good at one thing, like robotics, say, or they're really good at debate or something, and they're just exceptional. Like they're going to national competitions, and they're really good, and they'll get trumped by basically someone who is not. It does a lot of things, jack of all trades, master of none, right? And I would posit, and I would say it's more like it's definitely important to find what you should be specializing in, and go full force into that, and really. Obviously, don't just let everything else atrophy. Keep those up to like a sustainable point, but you don't need to go about trying to be a master of everything. That's just fruitless, and in the end, it's less efficient.
And you don't need to pursue a goal just because somebody else tells you that's what you need to pursue.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
If you wind up going and ticking a certain set of boxes, that is completely wrong. Now, I'm not saying that would take place, but if in the university admissions process you find yourself contorting yourself into something that you're actually not in order to fit all the check boxes that you think that they want to have checked, then that means that university is not a good fit for you. If you find yourself contorting yourself for a job, even if, say, it's something that if it's something that you're very, very interested in and passionate about, but you don't have so much experience, you can still get the position. It's not going to be easy, but you can still do it. But if it's something that you could, that just is wrong for you, that it's wrong, and still you think that, well, somehow this is prestigious, I have to go for it.
Right.
And then you wind up selling your soul for it, essentially. It's not worth it. It's not going to benefit you, and it's not going to benefit anybody else. Now, with that said, there are certain things that are more worth pursuing than others. Specifically, pursue things that will allow you to make a decent living. In other words, to be able to produce enough value to be able to provide
Right.
for your needs and the needs for all your and the needs
Exactly.
of all your dependents.
Yeah.
Don't get a degree in underwater basket weaving. That isn't going to accomplish anything for you.
Right.
I mean, nobody wants to sit around watching YouTube videos of underwater basket weaving, as evidenced by the amount of money advertisers will spend to put ads on underwater basket weaving videos. If you go and you add up all that ad revenue and divide it by the number of people that would be doing it, that would be your essential market share. So you have to combine the idea of doing something that is actually congruent with your character and of pursuing something that is actually relevant in the market.
And sustainable. Yeah. Exactly.
Did you have
So
something
even
else
if
you wanted to add before we go to this? Before we go to the actual meat of what this particular chapter's discussing?
um I had one thing. It was on the tip of my tongue. Let me retrieve it really quickly. Um, and this is again, I'll bring back this anecdote. I've talked about it in previous streams, but when I visited WashU, which is like the best school in my area in the Midwest, I live like an hour away from St. Louis, Missouri, and it's like the flagship, like the best school. It's like the Ivy League of the Midwest, right? And this is one thing they advertise. They're like, get a math major and art history, blah blah blah, do all these extra random things, and I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. And I even see this coming up in literature, whether that be TV shows, books, anime, etc. You'll see like character design. I've seen character design specifically that there's people who are actually there. So for example, this is like a character in a book would be very talented, and say there's some system of whatever, if it's a fantasy thing, their energy, whatever. And I saw a specific example of where someone was very good at a certain thing, and then they became very good at something that was not natural to them, and they ended up basically wasting their talent. They wasted this. They were very good at this thing, and they were also good at the other thing, but they weren't nearly as good, and so they ended up basically wasting their potential. And that was like a sub theme of the episode that I watched of this show. And I agree that you should be finding, now obviously how interested you are. Like, you could be the best in the world at something, and I don't think you should be pursuing that just for your own good, because that mental health takes precedent in these sorts of things. But even if you're good at a lot of things, you should still seek out that one thing that you really like. If you can, seek out that one thing, and if you're very very good at things, then you should pick the one that is most interesting to you,
Or suck
and
it
then
up, do it, and
add
retire
just another
early.
criteria for selection, and specialize in that. This is the current call. Like, it's just not efficient. Like, it's just not efficient at all. Like, I don't know. There's no more to say about that, but that's a good caveat into what we're about to talk about here in economics. It's a really important economic principle.
Yes. So I was thinking of jumping straight into the one example of Japan versus the United States being able to produce a certain amount of food or clothes per capita, and what should people produce, or what should Japan versus the United States produce, assuming that there is free trade between the two of them. I'll go and open up this. So, if the United States can produce 2 units of food per worker and 1 unit of clothing per worker, and Japan can produce 3 units of food per worker and 9 units of clothing per worker, what should Japanese focus on producing, and what should Americans focus on producing?
Yeah, so Japan should focus on clothing. And even when you consider in the example how there's 50 million workers and such, and there's 200 million in the US, Japan should focus on what they're good at, clothing, and the United States, food.
Okay. Exactly. Due to the fact that they will have an advantage in the marketplace due to having more of something valuable, assuming that 1 unit of food and 1 unit of clothing are essentially commensurate with each other, or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But you'll have more to trade. Just because nobody wants baskets woven underwater, or very, very few people want baskets underwoven by somebody in a scuba suit or holding his breath or whatever. That doesn't really have market value, but
Right.
but food and clothes both do. So the first example that they give is, okay, say everyone produces half of what, it diverts half of their production into food and half into clothes. So then Japan gets 75 million food and 225 million clothes. US gets 275 million food and 325 million clothes. But so we look at the second scenario, in which Japan produces only clothing. They wind up having 450 million clothes produced. And food, the US winds up having 400 million food produced. Now, if they trade, then, well, you wind up having the total output of 400 million food and 450 million clothes. And if we compare it to what happens to a total output of 275 million food and 325 million clothes, if there is no trade and just half of the workforce, you wind up diminishing total productivity if you decide that you're not going to trade and then trust that someone else will go and make up for your weakness with their comparative strength. It doesn't actually make sense to go and ruin yourself just for the purpose of screwing somebody else because you don't like them. So here we are having the total consumption. We would have, if you split it out, if you split all the output in half and then trading half of your output to the other country, you still wind up getting more food and clothes per the amount of work done than you would have otherwise.
And the intuition you could say is, if you put all of your workers into one thing and split, basically cut it in half and give, so you specialize in one thing, the thing you're good at. You put all your workers into it and you split the difference, right? You give the other country half and you take half, assuming they're equal. You can see that you would essentially be doing. You're essentially, if you're producing the thing you're bad at, you're already splitting it in half. Anyway, by splitting your workforce in half, and since you're worse than them, you get less.
By foregoing the production of something that you could do more of.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the way, workers are a scarce resource. People are a scarce resource. What it is we put our minds to, what it is we put our hands to, makes a difference. So we have to think about what it is. What is it that I'm going to produce? Am I producing something that other people can't? And ultimately, if you are in a position of producing something better than everyone else, whatever it is, if there's a market for it, that's what you should be producing. Because that gives you a comparative advantage, and then you can trade that advantage, or you can trade the results of that advantage for the results of somebody else's comparative advantage in something else that you want. And
Yep.
the reason these advantages take place is partially due to personal drive, partially due to circumstance, partially due to mechanization.
Yep.
And
Which ties into circumstance as well.
yeah, all the different factors play into it.
Yeah.
And part of it has to do with division of labor as well, due to the fact that if you wind up getting a cohort of people together that even within making one thing divide the labor appropriately, you can have, and this is centuries old, of making pins. That 10 persons were able to make 48,000 pins in a day, but if they would have all done their work separately, each of them could barely, perhaps not even made 20 or even 1 pin in a day, due to the fact that they would need to keep on changing tools, changing tactics, and so on. You know, an assembly line works because you can get a fluid motion of a product through an assembly line.
And when you focus on one task only, you naturally get better at that task. When we go back to what we've talked about in earlier streams, the ultimate resource, our brain, we're learning creatures, right? So when we do one thing for a long time, we naturally think of ways to do it better. We naturally just get better in general at it, etc. It becomes more clear what strategy we should do, and it's also sorts back to an example, Matt, when he was talking about dealing with, this was on a different segment of the stream, but when he was talking about dealing with the handyman that worked around the place he was leasing or living in, when Matt, he was baffled by the fact that Matt would unscrew all the nails and then take them all out in one fell sweep instead of switching it up.
Because I used the pry bar on the nails, got them all loose, and then I pop them all out. But I didn't do that because it involved use of 2 tools, and I didn't want to go and waste time switching tools in between every single one of the. I don't know how many dozens or hundreds of nails I had to pop out.
Exactly. So yeah, no, it's very it's intuitive in the sense that if you're doing one thing repeatedly, you're going faster because you're not having to switch things up, and you also get better at doing that one thing. And so when you specialize in something, you exacerbate your own specialization, and etc. And yeah, like it makes complete sense, and there's a variety of reasons why it makes complete sense to specialize.
Yeah.
And the Japan American example is a great great example of that in motion.
Yep. It's and going back to home life, because time is a scarce resource, if we decide to divvy up chores evenly or fairly, wherein each of us does exactly half of each chore.
Oh God,
that's horrible. I mean, let's say if I'm halfway done mowing the lawn, do I give the mower to my wife and say, "Here, you mow the rest"? Here, let me finish breastfeeding the little. No, wait a minute. Hold on. How is that supposed to work?
Right.
Or in the middle of dish. I mean, I can see trading off in the middle of dishes if that makes sense. But if someone else is doing something else instead of doing, yeah, of course. As a partner in life, you go and you help out where help could be used. But if your efforts are better, your efforts are better used somewhere else, then use them somewhere else.
Right.
Work where your comparative advantage is, and the trade that you get is ultimately the fact that both of you are living together, and the resources that belong to one of you belong to both of you. So obviously, you want to be making the greatest possible contribution to your net pool at any given time. It's not saying that I hate you because Uh, I, I'll do this and you'll do that. I, it, I don't take it as a gigantic slap in the face and I hate you because I want you to do masculine things and I hate my wife because I want her to do feminine. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it just shows how divorced these kinds of weird ideas are from reality. I mean, I'm wondering how many people that actually go and propagate these things have children of their own, or have families of their own, or even
Hmm.
are in a relationship of their own. It's like you sit on your high chair somewhere and arbitrarily decide that everyone should have exactly the same kind of life because that's more
Yeah.
valuable than everyone having the best life that they can have.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because someone else's best might be better than my best. And
Right.
conversely, someone else's best might be worse than my best.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are scared by the idea that that people's bests are different, and other times people are just, have the green-eyed greedy monster coming and saying, I don't want to give an opportunity for people that I know are better than me to actually achieve
Right.
better results than me.
Hmm. Yeah.
A lot of it
Both
can be
negative.
boiled down to wanting to chop off tall poppies, and
Hmm.
another
Harrison
of it can,
Bergeron.
yeah, and then another part of it can have to do with simply not thinking things through,
Right.
to
Because it's
getting so latched on a particular idea, getting so latched on a buzzword that reality fails.
they
What
just see through reality through different glasses.
yeah, yeah, they see reality through such a different set of glasses that the glasses itself winds up distorting the reality
Yeah.
to the point where they're actually not advocating for people to have a good life anymore.
No, exactly.
Division of
And
labor is healthy, but that doesn't mean that every couple needs to divide labor the same. Holy crap.
exactly. You decide, like, everyone has different circumstance. So yeah, there's definitely relationships with stay-at-home dads, and that's because that person needs to, like, the wife is the breadwinner in this case. Then the guy, the dad, if their kids are not having enough time with parents, for example, for example, if the guy did not have a job or whatever, or it's just not worth it for him to be going out there and working, it'd make much more sense for him to spend time with the kids. Like that
Or if
that
he
that is the
or if he has a job that he can do from home,
yeah, yeah. There you go.
or if they've organized it, made deals with their employers that, uh, dad can get a 3-day weekend on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and
Hmm.
mom can get a 3-day weekend on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Right.
Oh wow! Now all of a sudden, we only have to worry about Wednesday and Thursday. Well, I mean,
Right.
what a division of labor that would be. That would be, in the corporate world, pretty amazing. And then, of course, you have
Yeah.
Sundays. You have Sunday as a family day.
Right. Exactly. It makes complete sense, and I think there's the false notion that if you split up the same, basically the notion behind communism, right? That labor hours are all equal. Like, no, value is not constrained to how much time someone put into something. And if you went on that assumption, then it would make sense to treat everyone equally and split the hours evenly, because the outcome will be the same regardless, right? But because because time is the scarce resource here, and everyone's okay. I'm everyone generally experiences time in the same way, and so it would if you went across that assumption, then you can see the faulty systems that arise with it, that fail to work, because and it's really, like, that's a big maybe it's not intuitive to everyone, but it's important to accept this as how it works, and think about and cogitate why. Although I'm assuming most of our viewers it is self-evident, but still, this is really important.
Well, this isn't only to the people that are here
True.
currently.
Also,
These are also. We could be donning on the Captain Obvious hat here and saying things that ultimately, you guys can bring to your social circles, and
right.
anyone who sees these videos in the future could benefit from seeing and thinking about these things in different ways than what the society essentially programs us to think.
Mm-hmm. And I think the
by
lens of
trying to cram everyone through a cookie cutter.
yeah, and I think the lens of economics is really, really, and which is at this point it's my favorite social science or what, or soft science. I used to like psychology more, but I think this is actually a little bit cooler, and like you'll see how well these lenses that we're talking about here, and in that book, in the free market, and in that PDF, like apply to everything, and how it's very intuitive, honestly, how to optimize systems, and why education and stuff can so easily be optimized by stop throwing so much cash into it and let people specialize, and let people have enough skills in areas that they're not specialized in, that they can subsist, and that they can get by, etc., like to where it's not deleterious to them to not know. Like if you're like a god at math and you can do all this abstract math but you can't read, obviously it's going to be hard to function in society. So there's basic skills that everyone should know, but then there's a point where people should be branching out,
but reading. I mean, the body of literature, the body of freely accessible literature, is so big that ultimately knowing how to read and having an inkling as to what keywords to use to research different things is enough to be able to figure out what to do. You don't even need to know. You don't even need to know technically keywords, because you can just go onto a platform like Quora and ask, "How do I do X?" And then you can wind up having 50 different people who know how to do X telling you how to do X, and then you can go and think, well, here are the commonalities. Here are all the contingencies that people have warned me about. I have a good idea. I guess I can maybe take a little risk and try to do X.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then you take that risk and then you learn.
Exactly, and especially one for me, for example, was seeing like how basically faults in our government, and faults that might be easily passable or like kind of discreet. We'll cover this in a later stream, this part of the latter part of this book, but there's an example of the Tongass forest, or the Tongass forest, and stuff like that, which we'll go into later. But if you understand these basic principles in economics, it's like infinite how many things, you'll see everything through a different lens almost. It's one of those things that it's kind of rare for me, but when I'm learning, it's one of those things that I learn upon learning it, I'm like, holy crap, I'm looking at everything differently now. And I'm I actually feel quote unquote enlightened, as corny as that sounds. But yeah, really, these fundamental principles, which are not esoteric or super hard to understand, but maybe it's easy to not think about them when brought to the forefront of what's going on. A lot of things can be made sense of, and a lot of things you can see improvements in a lot of systems, etc. Just by how much overlap there is between this and everything, just dealing with people. I mean, nature automatically does this shit. Nature automatically, because people aren't I guess free will and stuff kind of sometimes throws a bit of a wrench into the equation, because ants play their role, right? They're designed to do that. They don't think otherwise. But us humans have the luxury, and also, it's a double-edged sword. We can stray from the path of what we should be doing quite easily, especially in this day and age where it's really easy to just live without doing anything. Which as we talked about earlier in earlier in the stream, like the age, the respect your elders thing, how it came about was the people who are older are like, if someone survives past when most people are dying, like, yeah, like you should glean some wisdom from these people because they probably know some things, but like that's coming less and less the case. So it's easy to stray off the path of how things are kind of like should be running.
50s are the new 30s.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's unfair and arrogant for me to think this, but I fully intend to live over 100 years, even though I do have diabetes, and even though I'm not in the best health I could possibly be in. I really think that that's a possibility. And of course, I could die tomorrow. But I'm at least I'm going to live as if I'm going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I'm going to treat myself in such a way that I'm going to make it another 80 plus years. And I'm going to hope that medical advances will help making it to 100 a doable thing. And then also, if I do things that are inherently good, as we were talking about hour one with Caleb, doing things that are intrinsically good just because they are good, and because life is too short to do otherwise, you can count on, if you do make it through a longer life, those good things yielding their fruit. If you plant the seed, whatever it is that grows out of the seed will grow. So, investing your time planting seeds that you actually want to have grow is a good use of your time. Even if you don't get to be the one to enjoy them, your children will. And even if you don't have any children, well, the people you care about will. And even if you don't care about anyone, well, at least humanity is going to be left somehow better off on account of your existence. Even if you completely fade and your name doesn't get a mention in the pages of history,
which most of us,
which that basically speaks about all of us. I mean, I would like to, if someone were to write something about me, I would want it to be something about changing the way people do education in the 21st century, and then ultimately this dude could rarely be found due to the fact that he was busy being a husband and a father.
Yeah. Think about what you would want to be known for, etc. And and think about time as a scarce resource, and think, etc. Which we were talking about earlier with Caleb again. It's none of this should be undermined at all. It all connects together quite nicely, I found.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the biggest things we all can do to further ourselves and others, but even if all we do care about is ourselves, being productive is the best thing we can do.
Right, and doing what you're good at.
Like, if we look at that whole the whole instance of time being a scarce resource, plotting the demise of others is stupid. Plotting the demise of others is stupid. Behaving suboptimally is stupid.
Yep.
Oh, was someone saying something in chat?
Yeah. David did. Oh, now he said.
And cutting the background music after the intro. Super distracting with brain impairment.
Oh, Thomas. It's Thomas West. Awesome. But yeah,
I could definitely turn the volume down. I've wound up having it go both ways. I'd like to be able to serve the majority of the people that are doing it. We can try different things, but I'll definitely turn it down for you now. Even though we are almost.
Awesome to have you here, Thomas.
Yeah, I don't know if what I did accomplished anything at all.
He said appreciate it, so I think it might have.
Yeah, but he might have appreciated only the sentiment, and then
True. I was thinking that too. That doesn't exactly differentiate there.
I'll turn I'll turn it down, and then we can go and.
He said it
Yeah.
did it first.
Meaning the volume is now back up to where it was. That's odd.
Oh, he said awesome sounds great.
Okay. Good. So that means I'm going to have to go and modify this this sound file because it has highly variable amplitude.
Yeah.
I've been messing with the volume multiple dozens of times and restarting the track and so on due to the fact that it's been too loud for my own ears as well, even though I can barely hear anything. In fact, the only reason I have the music is for the sake of other people.
Yeah. I can't hear it.
Well, good for you. It's actually incredibly annoying for me, but yeah, I have it blasting into my own ears, and the music is for me. There reaches this point where it's either on or off, and the volume resolution of probably I'm guessing my volume control, not because these headphones are decent. The volume resolution of my volume control is such that it's either just almost as loud as you are, or or nothing,
or
nothing,
or nothing. Okay,
so I'm going to have to mess around with Audacity tomorrow and get a good 3-hour track ready to go.
Yeah.
Which I was trying to do, but every single time I've done it so far, I wound up crashing my machine because I've had too many things running at once, and I don't know how to just calm down and do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
See, this is what happens
when you divide
when you don't utilize scarce resources like a CPU and memory appropriately. You crash your machine and then you don't accomplish anything. See, you can learn from my mistakes. Don't be stupid like Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Matt's also going to have a lot to do tomorrow.
Thomas West says, from a mental health perspective, doing what you are good at in service of others is the behavioral sweet spot for me personally.
I would at least put it as a recommendation for everybody. It's certainly the only thing I can do to stay sane.
At least try it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Agreed.
Having both some sort of internal significance for what it is that you're doing, and then not having it be something that you completely suck at. That sweet spot, that combination
is great.
Yeah. It's just that many people prefer to have the safety, I suppose, of society telling them what they need to be. Of course, society does actually tell you what you need to be. It's a later topic. It's price signaling. Like, will people pay you for it? Or will you, conversely, produce something that you need? If people will pay you for something, and I don't necessarily mean like making your living laying down, I don't exactly recommend that. But if people will pay, if people will pay you for something, then that means society's telling you that it needs whatever you have to offer, and it doesn't matter what you look like, or what you sound like, or what you smell like. But people might not necessarily buy, perishable food products from you if you smell like a sewer. But here.
Here's a sandwich. It's like, oh, okay.
But aside from those basic
smell
things,
signaling.
Yeah, aside from bathing regularly and taking good enough care of yourself that you're able to at bare minimum manage in society, yeah, price signals. In other words, the price that someone is willing to pay for something generally gives a good idea of
Avoid,
what it
yeah,
is that you should be
living
doing.
cash.
And
Mm-hmm.
if you can, as a family or even as an individual, do everything that you need for yourself, and that's all you ever want in life, well then do it. If you want more, well
Yeah.
then you better produce more. Find a way of producing more, and if you produce too much of whatever it is and not enough of something else, well then trade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very very basic economic stuff. And
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting little debate going on in the. Oh
oh
wait.
boy,
Well,
I gotta
well, let me.
read.
Well, I can read it to you. Um, so Thomas West says our intrinsic values are defined by our extrinsic behavior. And then David says no, and he says intrinsic values are metaphysical or natural. And then he said, sorry, read your comment wrong. And then Thomas West says, why the distinction? Metaphysics is simply mental masturbation that cannot be proved.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. It cannot be proven.
Right, yeah.
Nevertheless, I think that a lot of us do have a priori assumptions about how the world works that dictate how we should behave in it.
Yeah.
That's what moral models are. That's where our idea of something good or better or bad or worse come from.
Right.
Dude, I mean, and it has to do with, okay, I'm going to aim at that which is good. I'm not going to aim at that which is bad. If we don't have any value system whatsoever, and of course I'm going from metaphysics to value systems, but that's because I'm just sticking on the topic of axiomatic systems. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is some axiomatic system and some fundamental axioms that you just kind of need to accept in order to get along with life. And you can
Yeah.
attempt to go even deeper, and that
It's
is
hard.
indeed and that is hard and often fruitless.
Yeah.
Not always, because you can go and find some sort of deeper truth if there is actually a way of finding it. But but once you get to fundamental axioms, then you need to just go and you know see what you can build on them.
Yeah.
By of course staying within an internally consistent realm. I mean, if you start
Mm-hmm.
introducing inconsistencies, that means you have to have contingencies, which means your axioms were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but
Critique the
but
axioms.
but anyhow, I'm
It's a whole
just
bunch of. It's a
okay.
lot to get. That's a lot to get into. Yeah.
The golden
Not
rule.
totally.
I very much like the golden rule. In fact, I think that
Yeah, I like it a lot
it
too.
works for me too.
That was one of the things that when I was young that sort of kept me in the Christian realm for probably longer than I would have been.
Uh huh.
Was because I really agreed with that axiom. I like that, and I really like how it says as you would have them do unto you,
Oh,
not as
that's even better. That
it's
is even
really
better. Of course, if you look from a biochemical perspective and those biochemical processes that are pleasurable.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose that means if you're a crack addict, you go and give everyone else crack. So I'm sorry that doesn't work.
You're a
I
sex addict. You just go.
you just going right over. No. Yeah, sorry,
No, no,
sorry. I just went and disproved my whole. Okay, yeah. Do unto
no. You
others
just
as they
go
would
and
have you do unto them.
you
But then,
consensually ask them if they would
well,
like
yeah.
it.
Well, I'm about ready to say. Well, there's also this, the reciprocity thing, and that's where negotiations come in.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, let's say, for instance, I'm married to my wife, and some other woman makes a competing demand, right? So if the axiom says that I'm supposed to go and acquiesce to this other demand on account of the fact that this person needs done to her what she wants done to her, but then I've also made a promise to my wife, then what do I do? Well, clearly there are some
Right.
promises that there are some scenarios that and there the bunny trail goes.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why you can't these things. It's really hard. It's not like math, it just isn't.
And that's what a system of priorities is for.
Yeah, exactly. Heuristics often I find work a lot better in these sorts of situations than
Oh yeah.
trying
Well,
to hard fast pummel it into a
we're
very
humans.
very straight.
We're
Which
humans.
roots back into because David says, can ethics be derived logically?
Well, to some extent, but then
Yeah, Thomas West
I would
says,
say to some extent, because then you can have the ethics of doing anything to get into power, lying, cheating, stealing, killing, whatever else could be construed as
yeah.
ethical.
Thomas West says, of course, starting from an empirical biological basis and proceeding from there. And then David says, no, it's not substantial enough. See, I feel like it just gets into the bunny hole, as you said, the rabbit hole.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. Oh, this is gonna be fun, and somehow I get the idea that this conversation isn't gonna be over. But it is now getting time to wind up the stream. Just this conversation was starting to get good too.
Yeah. I mean, but this is not a after dinner conversation. Oh, okay, before I leave, let me say this one thing. Can ethics be derived logically? Hey, by the way, do you know? Like, this is not this isn't even like a core question. Like, this is for your own self to do your own research and come to your own conclusions, I suppose.
This is left as an elementary exercise for the student. Now go.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, teach. By the way, hey, I have a question about the homework. Can
Out of office. Do not bother.
Yeah, exactly. That's what exactly.
Okay, so I can already tell you I'm going to get along very well with Thomas West, because he goes and he sees the end result of the bunny trail, and you don't need to go through every single step in order to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is that means there won't be that much time wasted in conversation. Yes.
Awesome. INTJs rejoice. INTPs cry everywhere.
Well, you're the ENTP, right?
Yeah, I don't want. I don't. Either way is fine for me. Talking to people is fine either way.
Of course, you're an extrovert, so
yeah. Yeah, so I just derive it from a different source. I don't need my P to go wild. I can just choose which one I'm trying to.
You don't
exercise.
need your P to go wild. I'll just leave.
It'd be good if I don't do that, especially for the custodians and
if you don't use your P to go wild.
Yeah, or myself when my own. Yeah, I don't have to clean that up. So yeah.
Yeah, that would going wild in that way might be a little too much.
Yes. David says it doesn't need to, so Thomas said gets into metaphysics. David says obviously. Thomas says nope. I like to skip around. He's talking about us. I'm an INTP. Yes, I figured he was an INTP.
Yeah. That's obvious, by the way, that you structure your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And David says it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs substantiation. But I think the substantiation in the end becomes complicated because it becomes a question of not only like semantics and stuff, but like what you like realms of acceptability, and like that's so personal. Like some people really like to be super exact. Some people are, it's fine, leave it. Some people really like to be exact, but then recognize that they can't do it, so they just take their hands off the wheel there. So it's just yeah. And Thomas says, perpetuation of our species and the biosphere that supports it. Hello, Dad.
Oh, are you done yet?
Nope.
Well, we're invited to dinner
Where?
at Dennis Knowles.
Okay.
You want to go?
I was planning to see Jeff later today.
Okay.
But thanks for the invitation, and can you extend a thank you to them as well?
I will.
Thank you. See you. I was invited to dinner, but I have prior plans. Let's see.
Mhm.
So Thomas says perpetuation of our species in the biosphere that supports it.
All valid ethics
All
must proceed from
must
there.
proceed from
Morals
there.
are personal. Ethics are universal.
Yes.
All right. So finally, we got to a truth statement by Thomas. Great. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. We got to a fundamental axiom. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Boom.
Yes.
There we go. We got to a fundamental axiom. We're 20 minutes late for the ending of the stream, and I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. I'll cut the videos and so on before uploading the final version, just so that there isn't all this technical difficulty, mumbo jumbo, jibber jabber crap going on. Thank you all for your patience, and I thank you, Stephen, for your patience and for bearing with me, and for the lovely conversation. Thank you all in the chat for the lovely conversation too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There we go.
All right. We'll see you then, Eastern Daylight Time on Monday at 9 p.m. We'll be going until midnight. Anyone and everyone is welcome to view. The chat is largely unmoderated. So, see you then.
As it should be.
Bye.